So, good afternoon, students and colleagues who are participating. Today, we'll be discussing about neurobiology of dysarthria. Please raise your hands. All are able to listen? Somebody say yes. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. Thank you. That's enough. So let's start with neurobiology, and we'll have to discuss some definitions which you may be knowing, which you may not be knowing. But important thing is, what are the cranial nerves that will be responsible? What are all the anatomical structures? So we'll start with some definitions, linguistics, and we'll not be touching in depth, but we'll just briefly mention a phoneme. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in speech. When we teach reading, we teach children which letters represent those sounds. For example, the word hat has three phonemes, H, A, and T. In English, there are 44 phonemes, or word sounds that make up the language. They are divided into 19 consonants and digraphs and are controlled sounds, vowels, long vowels, short vowels. And so all these sounds are produced in the oral cavity with the proper functioning of labial muscles, lingual muscles involves the
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, sir. I think you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, right now I corrected it.
Okay, okay.
So actually, I lost the connection in between.
Okay, sir.
Now is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Right. One second. Go to expand this. They're all there, but the speaker is not coming. Just let's just come back to you. You all there? Is it okay? Hello?
Yes, sir.
So
You're able to see?
Uh,
Are you able to see the presentation?
no, sir.
No.
no, sir.
So we're
Oh,
seeing your sign in for Google account.
okay. Uh, but there are too many shares here, I think. No, this is not done. Don't see. Let's close it. Screen share stopped as shared window is closed. Okay, that's good. And let us start again. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now you're able to see?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Right. Thanks. Final. At last. Thank you. So let's go. And these are the phonemes and graphemes. Most of you will be aware. So we'll skip this. Now let's come back to the dysarthria. Dysarthrias are disorders of speech production. A group of motor speech disorders caused by damage to the central or peripheral nervous system that creates weakness, slowness, incoordination, or abnormal muscle tone in musculature used to produce speech. So, and there are some more aspects than weakness, slowness, incoordination, or abnormal muscle tone. You require the support of some other functions also. So, this Darley's definition of 1975 has been modified subsequently because it's not the only thing. Dysarthria can be produced by problems other than weakness, slowness, incoordination, or altered muscle tone. So the definition is extended to include a group of neurological speech disorders resulting from abnormalities in the strength, speed, range, steadiness, tone, or accuracy of movements required for the control of respiratory, phonatory, resonatory, articulatory, and prosodic aspects of speech production. This is Duffy in 2005. There are so many aspects which will be taken into consideration. So, if you look at the motor speech disorders, they include dysarthria and apraxia of speech. The apraxia of speech is a motor planning and programming disorder. Here, the hallmark characteristic is they will be searching and groping for articulatory placement. Other
Sir,
symptoms? Yeah. Yes.
sir, can you put it on slideshow mode?
Is it? I am on slideshow mode.
Because we are not able to see what you're presenting.
Actually, not able to see.
No, means the screen is shared, but the slideshow, like you have to put it on slideshow mode.
Oh, right. Right. It decided suddenly. Right. This is the presentation which you are seeing. Are you able to see the presentation now? Are you able
So
to see it?
actually the home toolbar is very large. Yes, now we can see.
Now you are able to see?
Yes,
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 sir.
now we can see.
Okay. So the approach speech is a motor planning programming disorder. And the neurological damage here can occur in Broca's areas 44, 45, supplementary motor, insular cortex, and basal ganglia. All damages in these areas can give rise to one type of motor speech disorder, that is apraxia. Have to learn to differentiate. So dysarthria versus apraxia versus aphasia. The dysarthrias are the result of disturbances in the motor system that between the creation of an motor speech plan and the execution of that motor plan by the relevant that is dysarthria. So you can have dysfunction of labial muscles, that is facial muscles, and you can have dysfunction of the trigeminal nerve innervated muscles, that is lateral pterygoid, medial pterygoid, and masseter muscle, and you can have various muscles that are innervating the muscles supplying the tongue, that is plexus, and various other intrinsic and extrinsic tongue muscles supplied by hypoglossal nerve, and the pharyngeal group of muscles supplied by vagus. All these things, in addition to the respiration, are important in sound production. Whereas apraxia speech is inability to create the appropriate motor plans for execution of muscle movements for speech. Everything is normal, but still they are not able to speak properly. And aphasia will deal separately, that is language disturbance. So the Mayo Clinic model of dysarthria classification is depicted here. Lower motor neuron, we'll define what is the lower motor neuron. Spasticity and upper motor neuron bilateral will give rise to spastic dysarthria. If it is a unilateral upper motor neuron, you have spasticity and weakness, that is in strokes, which you see. Ataxic incoordination, that is cerebellum or cerebellar connections with the central nervous system, that is the dentate nucleus, and its connections with red nucleus, and red nucleus connections to thalamus, thalamus to cortex. So those are the dentate rubrothalamocortical tract and corticopontocerebellar connections. The hypokinetic, that is reduced movement and reduced range of movement because of basal ganglia, and that is especially the corpus stratum, and the cortex, the connected to corpus stratum and globus pallidus internus and externus, and its connections through the substantia nigra and back to cortex, and that is a modulation of the hyperkinetic extra and abnormal movements. This is also same basal ganglia connections with CNS. So if you consider the neuraxis, there is an upper motor neuron, there is a synapse with a lower motor neuron that can be in the base, in the brain stem. The lower motor neurons of cranial nerves, which are very important, are fifth nerve, the seventh nerve, the ninth nerve, the 10th nerve, and the 12th nerve. These are all important, and the upper motor neurons, which are coming from the fourth layer of the cerebral cortex, they synapse with these neurons and control the function of the muscles they are innervating. So that's another important aspect. That's the lower motor neuron. And in this neuraxis, you have the upper motor neuron, the synapse, nucleus, the neuron of the lower motor neuron, its axon, and its synapse with the muscle, that is neuromuscular junction, the muscle. And this whole circuit is controlled by two outside the circuit things, that is the basal ganglia, and the cerebellum. So these things you keep in mind, what the voice production, voice modulation, voice control, the speed, the range, all these vast apparatus have to work in coordination. So the voluntary motor there are various reflexes, there are various levels, the brainstem, the spinal cord, the subcortical centers, groups of neurons, that is central pattern generators, which are coordinating various functions. They are aggregates of reflexes. They combine multiple reflexes to complete a patterned response. So these are very important. The coordination between various centers is very important for speech production. So neural control of speech involves the movement of the muscles that requires knowing where the body is in the space and the condition of the joints and tendons and muscles, that is supplied by the proprioception. So this skilled movement in the body involves a plan, and these plans are stored and they can be retrieved consciously or subconsciously. The plan is integrated with an efferent system, that is sensory motor integration, in order to achieve a task. It can be a movement of a limb or it can be speech. It can be movement of the muscles to produce the sounds. The coordinated movements of all the speech apparatus will give rise to sound. So this is a voluntary act. So there are, this control is by different loops. There are two different open loop components in the speech. One is the preparative loop, that is the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, anterior insula, and supplementary motor area, thalamus, vitamin caudate, and inferior cerebellum. They are all responsible that preparative loop, and which sends the signal for the voice production, all happening at a rapid speed in the brain. And the executive loop is the motor cortex, thalamus, putamen, caudate, and cerebellum. So this is the speech and the feedback loops. These are feedback and corrections. So if you look at the feedback, there is a closed loop feedback and there are open loop systems. The closed is the process of comparing the motor act with expectation, what is to be said, and correcting the action to match the expectation. You listen to a song and you try singing the same way, correcting there. That is a closed loop feedback. Inherently slow process because it happens in real time. It depends on the quality of the sensation that is monitoring the action also. So the other one is the open loop systems, which are very frequently used. They don't rely on feedback. The error correction in the execution of the task happens as it is, the task is being done or executed. If this is unsuccessful, then again they feed forward. There is a, so I'll show you a diagram where all these connections are helping the feed forward rapid execution offline corrections. So it is also slower because of limitations in the physical system. Now, the hierarchical state feedback control model of speech production, I'll show you another diagram also. You see there's a content in the brain that generates in the association cortex. The lemma hypothesis, the motor phonemes programs are in Broca's area 6 and 4, and they coordinate, coordination is done by the cerebellum and the vocal tract. Auditory syllable targets are there in the Broca's area, supplementary temporal gyrus, and the coordinated transforms. And all these connections are very important. This diagram, this thing, the syllable program, what is given here, is important in voice production. Initial non-verbal concept or idea triggers the speech act. It has no phonological form yet when it was decided. The word is generated and projected simultaneously to the syllable programmer, that is the Broca's area 44, left insula, the temporoparietal junction, and motor phoneme programmer, which is present in the the Broca's area 6 and 4, that is supplementary motor area, premotor region, and cerebellum. So these are integrating, they are acting in tandem to produce. So this is a diagram which we were showing. The motor phoneme programmer is here, the syllable program is here, that is idea 44, area 46, and somatic phoneme targets, syllable coordinate transform, auditory syllable targets. So these are some are coming from cerebellum also. This is very, very important to know. The what does the Bruch's temporoparietal junction loop? Now I was telling earlier also that this is the posterior heteromodal association cortex where a lot of memories are stored which are linked with one another. The auditory cortex is nearby, visual cortex is nearby, somatosensory cortex is nearby, and all the linked memories are stored, and these have to be unnetted to bring out and produce the sound. So use a sensory input to check for accuracy in execution. That is called directions into velocities of articulation. How much speed, how much modulation has to be given. It differentiates learning from ongoing production. That is a feedback. You can correct it while you are talking. There is an auditory model for phoneme which is generated and auditory cortex and somatosensory cortex. The produced word is checked against the target. If error is detected, you will correct the next production and you will modulate your voice. So there is so much happening in our speech. So Broca's TPJ loop develops phonological representations. This loop projects the Broca's area 1, 2, 3, that is somatosensory, also motor strip, that is error feedback to the cerebellum and premotor. That's how your speech is regulated to a large extent by these various areas, which you should remember. So the levels of motor system, the conceptual level, linguistic planning level, motor planning and programming level, motor control circuits, direct motor pathway, indirect motor pathway, the final common pathway are the lower motor neuron and the sensory system. They have to integrate to produce a normal speech, and its abnormality is dysarthria. So many components are there which can, the malfunctioning of any of these components can give rise to dysarthria. So conceptual level, it involves our thoughts, feelings, ideas when we are going to talk in anywhere. The prefrontal cortex and the limbic system probably have primary role at this level. When we want to express ideas and so forth, through speech, language, encoding must take place in upcoming levels. So all these things are happening at a rapid speed, and the things which have been encoded are retrieved very fast. And the linguistic plan happened much earlier. It was two parts: the language content, form, and use, like semantics, grammar, pragmatics, etc. They're already stored. The plans and arrangements of phonemes is already done in the brain. The premotor cortex, that is the Broca's area 6, is important area for all this planning. The motor planning and programming level, the plans and arrangements of phonemes. The motor programs involve execution of specific phonemes in time and space. They're very important, and programs involve discrete movements of tongue, lips, etc. Many motor programs make up a motor plan. The cerebellum, basal ganglia, supplementary motor area are important areas of programming, and this many motor programs, they make up a motor plan. So this is in brief the biology, but we'll go into the more important things, the motor control circuits, which include caudate nucleus, the putamen, the globus pallidus, regulates the motor functioning, especially tone and create appropriate sounds. Dyskinesias result when this system is damaged, and sound production also gets affected. So that's very, very important. All the anatomical structures, you can see the structures, the cortical motor areas, and this is the cerebral cortex, and you can see the caudate nucleus here, the internal capsule, the thalamus, the putamen, the globus pallidus, the subthalamic nucleus, and this is a midbrain where you got substantia nigra, and this will go to cerebellum. and the pons and the reticular formation. From here, pontocerebellar fibers will take the things to the cerebellum, and there are many cranial nerve nuclei present in the medulla also, goes down to the medulla also. These are connections. The cerebellar control, what I was telling you, the coordination of muscle movements is that they are skilled and sequential. That's the main job of the cerebellum. When this circuit is damaged, speech can become uncoordinated, resulting in a condition known as ataxic dysarthria. And these characteristics we'll see. So you can see the cerebellum, the dentato, rubro, thalamo, cortical tract is going back, and cortico-pontocerebellar tract is coming back, and some inferior cerebellar. So there are three peduncles: superior cerebellar peduncle, middle cerebellar peduncle, inferior cerebellar peduncle, which are conducting the impulses or the action potentials. These are the gray matter of the cerebellum, dentate nucleus, emboliform and fastigial nucleus, and the pontine nuclei, and this is the inferior olive. So these are all the circuits that are important for cerebellar function as well as the speech production. You can see the innervation to the trigeminal nucleus, the facial nucleus, the hypoglossal nucleus, and the nucleus ambiguous, which has got 9th, 10th, and 11th in together as a column of right? And these pyramidal tracts also, they go down to the spinal cord, cross, and end up in the anterior horn cells, which is the common pathway. So this is a pyramidal system. It involves lateral motor system, lateral corticobulbar, corticospinal tracts, and voluntary motor movements of the contralateral limbs and the speech muscles is controlled by the system, and it may have few stops. It crosses over at medulla and spinal cord junctions. So whenever there is a disturbance in this, what you get is dysarthria spastic variety. We have seen ataxic dysarthria. We have seen no spastic dysarthria. So direct damage to the direct motor pathways can lead to spastic dysarthria, which can be bilateral, which can be unilateral human dysarthria, or if it is only lower motor neuron involvement, it is element damage. So the motor pathways can be spastic muscles of the oral cavity. They can give rise to hypertonia, and these are the peripheral signs. But in oral cavity, this hypertonia of the muscles will cause spastic dysarthria, and flaccidity is the weakness, element damage that will cause hypotonia, and you get the dysarthria. So these are the features to differentiate in the peripheral neurology. All these features you should know about. So the motor pathways extrapyramidal system is also controlling this. What are the extrapyramidal? The basal ganglia and cerebellar circuits, which we have already seen. It also has medial motor systems. That is the anterior corticospinal tract, which is uncrossed. The vestibulospinal tract. These are all the reticulospinal, tectospinal tract is on the midway. So these tracts, the function is the posture and muscle tone, and it has also got many stops. It doesn't say center of the system is the tremors, chorea, ethicos, dystonia, myoclonus. So we have hyperkinetic dysarthria, Huntington's disease, hypokinetic dysarthria, that is Parkinson's disease. So this is another class. So we have seen the classification of dysarthria: flaccid dysarthria, spastic dysarthria, ataxic dysarthria, and hyperkinetic dysarthria, hypokinetic dysarthria. So the final pathway, final common pathway is the last leg of the motor signals journey. The motor signal, which is generated in the cortex, has to reach the lower motor neuron. To cross that, the synapses and cause the muscular contraction, then only is possible. The cranial nerves in the case of speech are the As I said, 7th, 10th, 12th. These are very important. Alpha motor neurons of these originating from these nuclei innervate extrafusal muscle fibers involved in the muscle contraction. The gamma motor neurons in the intrafusal fibers are involved in proprioception. The components of the speech include respiration, power for speech, phonation, raw sound for speech, resonance, tonal and qualities of the speech sounds, articulation, the musical quality of the speech, that is prosody. So various brain areas control all these aspects. The prosody is especially in the right central hemisphere, which we'll see in the end. So the multiple system damage leads to mixed dysarthria. There's a component called mixed dysarthria also. The components of the speech, that is respiration, which we said, phonation, resonance, articulation, prosody, and the cranial nerves that are important. Element damage can cause various problems. The trigeminal nerve, facial nerve, vagus nerve, hypoglossal nerve, and select spinal nerves of C3 and C5, T2 to 11, because they are innervating intercostal muscles, the diaphragm, C3 and C4. So these dysfunctions will affect the speech production, voice production. So the element damage, which you can see, the cerebrum, the impulses are coming down, the thoracic spinal nerves, all these external intercostal, pectoralis major, internal intercostals, serratus anterior, which is supplied by lung thoracic nerve, and the diaphragm, all are important in the production. Also, the nucleus ambiguous, which I was telling you, is giving the vagus nerve, which is, and it comes down, recurrent pharyngeal nerve, which is going, and they are innervating the superior laryngeal nerve, they are innervating the larynx. And the cricothyroid, arytenoid muscles all are innervated, which are the responsible for sound production. So this can, so now what all the muscles that can get damaged, and so you see these are all facial muscles. You can say them: occipitofrontalis, procerus, levator labia superioris, alque nasi, and orbicularis oculi, levator labia superioris, zygomaticus major, minor, levator anguli oris, masseter, buccinator, orbicularis oris, depressor anguli oris, mentalis platysma. All these muscles, which are facial muscles, if they are weak, there is a problem in voice production. You can see the tongue muscles here, intrinsic tongue muscles, genioglossus, hyoglossus, and they are attached to the mandible. Mandibular movement is important for sound production, and trigeminal nerve damage can give rise to defects in the movement of the jaw. So the sensory pathways are also important. They provide proprioception for speech. The body's eyes for itself, a body's knowledge of where its parts are in space. All these things are to be conveyed to the speech apparatus. The kinesthesia, brain's awareness of position, movement of the structures of especially the tongue. Joint position sense is very, very important. The dorsal column of the spinal cord, primary sensory cortex, thalamus, that is columns, they conduct fine touch, vibratory sense, proprioception. The spinothalamic ones conduct crude touch, pain, pressure, temperature. The spinocerebellar go to cerebellum, bring the information of proprioception. So the various dysarthria, spastic, unilateral upper motor neuron, flaccid, hyperkinetic, hypokinetic, ataxic, mixed. You can look at that bilateral upper motor neuron causing spastic, and there will be bilateral spasticity and weakness. Unilateral spasticity and weakness, most strokes. Hypotonia and weakness, usually especially Guillain syndrome or myasthenia gravis, where there is flaccidity and hypotonia and weakness. Hyperkinetic and abnormal movements that can be basal ganglia disorders, especially Huntington's disease. Basal ganglia connections may also cause hypokinetic, as seen in Parkinson's disease, because of the reduced movement and range of motion of various muscles involved in voice production. Cerebellum and its connections, if they are affected, then you get cerebellar ataxia along with ataxic speech, where there is no coordination between the respiration and the contraction of the voice production muscles. So there will be staccato speech, and there will be explosive speech, and people will not be able to pronounce the articular agility is lost. Ask them to say baby hippopotamus, they will not be able to say, but they will put stress on each and every syllable when it's taken out of speech, or the sudden explosive character in talking. That is because the respiration and the voice. So this is ataxic speech. And if variable mixed ones can be present, if there are damages, it's a mixed dysarthria. So for all of us, this brain diagram is very important. To recapitulate, superior temporal gyrus, temporal sulcus, middle temporal gyrus, middle temporal sulcus, and inferior temporal gyrus. Or this superior temporal gyrus is very important in speech function. Much important. Parietal non, the angular, the superior parietal lobule, intraparietal sulcus, and inferior parietal lobule. This is a TPG, very important. And the sensory pathways are connected to postcentral gyrus and the Broca's area, operculum, and here orbicularis. This is connected to. So this we have to remember also. You can see the frontal pole, the superior parietal lobule, the intraparietal sulcus, inferior parietal lobule. You can see and identify on neuroimaging also. If abnormalities are seen in these areas, the voice production and dysarthria results. So these are the numbers which you have to remember, which we've been mentioning in our discussions, and 45, 44, that is the Broca's areas, and got areas of 1, 2, 3, that is somatosensory areas, and area 2, that is the Wernicke's areas, which you should, the numbered areas which you have to remember, and this is a medial aspect and depicting the same. So this are pathway resulting in reduced rate of speech, excessive and equal stress, hoarse or harsh phonation, and reduced articulatory precision. We'll see all these characteristics in coming slides. Flaccid dysarthria, on the other hand, is caused by unilaterally lower motor neuron lesion that may include the cell body or neuron. This will typically involve cranial nerves and their processes or the fascicles. The result is low muscle tone and fasciculations or twitching of the muscle, damage to the cell body, areflexia, paralysis or paresis of the musculature. The speech effects depend on the cranial nerves involved. Seventh nerve link causes facial paralysis. Fifth nerve lesion causes masticatory paralysis. Vagus region causes vocal cord paralysis, and it will change functional frequency. So that is the fundamental frequencies, that is SLM. So apraxia of speech, as I said, is a disorder of planning arising from the lesions in the lesion in the insula. It is characterized by irregular, unpredictable errors of articulation. Generally, substitutions instead of distortions, halting speech, more difficulty with initial position of the words, consonants and clusters, but less difficulty when reading. These are, there are islands of fluent speech in which. So reading has got surface leads to area will result in difficulty in initiating speech. Present results in paralysis. Lesions to the premotor region result in ataxia. Found results in memory and interceptive agnosias. Intraparietal sulcus deficits, association between visual and motor function, as I was telling you, association that may cause and tactile agnosia. So speech systems organized groups of anatomic structures that promote the production of vocalized communication, including the circulatory system, the system, and the respiratory system. So all so flaccid dysarthria. the normal speech, what deviant characteristics listed in order of least common character is hyperness, monopassal, or harsh voice, monologue. So remember, this flaccid dysarthria, and it can be because of so many cranial nerves, and it's damage to the lower motor neurons or the fundamental pathway of the cranial nerves, or to the connections between cannot be effectively transmitted along the damaged lower motor neuron to the muscle to cue the muscle activation. The muscle innervated by these nerves have decreased tone or flaccidity, and it is due to inability of a damaged neuron to activate muscles to execute involuntary impulses of a muscle tone maintenance. The muscle tone maintenance also requires the gamma motor neuron feedback. That is lacking here. A muscle with too little tone is hypertonic, and damage to the elements produces weakness and flaccidity. The outcome of this weakness and flaccidity in the muscles of the articulators and speech structures is a motor speech disorder known as flaccid dysarthria. So you see the left unilateral damage, the uvula which is deviated, left unilateral damage, the pharyngeal plexus, resulting in asymmetry where the uvula is pulled to the right. So this is the normal side, this is the damaged side. Here, bilateral damage the pharyngeal plexus, resulting in centered and low hanging uvula. So on examination, you have to examine the oral cavity thoroughly and look at the position of the uvula, whether it is one side or it is depressed. So the other characteristics which we are going to talk are speech characteristics of the spastic dysarthria. Imprecise consonants, monopitch, reduced stress, harsh voice, monoloud, low pitch, slow rate, hypernasality, strained, strident voice quality, short phrases, distorted ovals, pitch breaks, breathy voice, excess equal stress. The latter part is less common. The mono pitch, imprecise consonants, reduced stress, strained, strangled voice quality is more important. So this is the activation, the UMN and the MN picture is given here. The pathway that is getting activated, the decussation in the medulla, and coming down, you can see midbrain, pons, medulla here, and they reach the lower motor neuron and also the skeletal muscle. So this is the whole neuraxis, and apart from this neuraxis, you have the basal ganglia and the cerebellum to control the speech. So flaccid dysarthria, on the contrary, can arise from trigeminal nerve damage, facial nerve damage, hypoglossal nerve damage, as can be discussed. Now, ataxic dysarthria, the motor speech disorder produced by incoordination of the movement articulation, which produces a slushy or a drunken-like speech quality and imprecise consonants, excess and equal stress. That's why staccato speech may be hippopotamus like that. Irregular articulatory breakdowns. They cannot say elolari fast, elolari. That rhythm is not generated. Distorted ovals, harsh voice, prolonged phonemes, prolonged intervals, monopitch and monoloud and slow rate. So this is the characteristic of ataxic dysarthria. Hypokinetic motor speech disorder that results from the pathology at the basal ganglia or its connection to other structures in the central nervous system. The deviant speech characteristics of hypokinetic dysarthria include monopitch first and reduced stress, monoloud, imprecise consonants, inappropriate silences, short rushes of speech, harsh voice, breathing, these things which you should remember and characterize when you patient bedside. Lastly, I'll talk two things and then finish. Hemispheric function. 85% of the population has left hemisphere dominant for language and motor control, but both the hemispheres work together. The left hemisphere, which I'm going to discuss in coming classes, is specialized for short duration information, for critical analysis and judgment, for rapid information processing, and for rule-based functions. Of hemisphere is essentially the first dictionary meaning only. It is accessed rapidly. The so is concrete. On the other hand, the right different and what it most of the things are not very well understood because it give less importance to the hemisphere. In the larger view, are responsible for placing left hemisphere information into correct context. It processes longer duration information, slower information, promotes the whole body knowledge. It is responsible for face recognition, melody, processing of spatial information. The attentional network relies mostly on the right hemisphere. It has rudimentary grammar, but seems to be the location of alternative meanings for words or synonyms. It appears that the right hemisphere is called into action when there is conflicting information that makes the primary definition inadequate. Because of its ability to integrate detail into context, it is critical for pragmatics. Right hemisphere lesion results in right hemisphere deficit, which also includes problems related to concreteness, loss of sense of humor, ability to process idioms, and most importantly, a hemispatial neglect. And it is not a blindness or a scotoma, but they just don't learned about the cranial nerves that are important for voice production. We always thought that the neuraxis starting from the upper motor neuron, synapses, the lower motor neuron cell body, the fascicle, the neuromuscular junction, the muscle, and two outside the neuraxis, that is the cerebellum and the basal ganglia. And we also thought that bedside you start checking for weakness of the facial muscles by making them utter labial sounds of pop, 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 ba. And the tongue muscle weakness can be elicited by asking them to pronounce the lingual sounds like ta, ta, da, da. And by the pharyngeal muscles, you can ask them to produce sounds of guttural nature, that is ka, ga, gi. And but the cerebellar agility, you make them talk rapidly, yellow lari, or for staccato speech, you ask them to pronounce baby hippopotamus, where they put stress on each every. When you see that a voice is very strangled voice, Are there any questions?
No, sir.
So please prepare for the dysarthria. We'll talk of other problems, neurobiology of aphasia and neuroradiology in the coming classes. Okay. If there are no questions, then have a good day.